Stories can be surprisingly complex things, filled to the brim with intricate plot twists, character dynamics, and multi-dimensional motivations that populate a fictional world to convey themes and emotions in a unique and/or thought-provoking manner. Sometimes stories can be rather simple little things, able to effectively convey some kind of message or moral through a rather straightforward and succinct series of events able to be discerned with just a singular pass. And maybe sometimes a second one is due. And then sometimes there are stories that don't really fit the mold, that are able to convey deep and thought-provoking philosophy through well-developed characters but told in unconventional ways. And sometimes it is because these stories break convention and buck tradition that they're able to carve a truly special place within the psyche of the consumers who consume that story. By all accounts, Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers should not have functioned as a story. It should have been ridiculed and criticized for taking a story that was in the midst of a climactic moment that had been built up over the course of 6 to 8 years and paused it to whisk the protagonist and their friends away to a completely different world and to tell that world's story. By all accounts, it should have been filler. There's barely any reasonable way this story could have been viewed halfway as interesting as what was just transpiring in the narrative up to that point, right? But that's not what happened, was it? No. Au contraire, mon ami. Shadowbringers would quickly go on to become known by its players as one of the greatest pieces of fiction ever conceived. Easily one of the best, not just Final Fantasy stories out there, which is already saying something, but one of the best stories ever told within the confines of a game. And some people, myself included, take it a step beyond that as well. What is it about Shadowbringers that makes this story so beloved, so evocative, and effective as a conveyor of theme, emotion, and character, that it entered the upper echelons of people's opinions regarding video games? Let's examine Shadowbringers, the world of the first, and its titular antagonist Emet Selch, to uncover why Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers is one of, if not, the greatest story ever told.
Become the warrior of darkness.
Right, so like I said, Shadowbringers begins with your character, the Warrior of Light, getting isekai'd or transported to another world to follow after the scions with their souls crane-gamed away as well. You wake up in the first, a parallel world of sorts, and must manage all new customs, people, tradition, and socio-political climates as you move to find your scattered friends in this world on the brink of demise at the hands of primordial light, turning people into wretched little sin-eaters in cruel and horrific ways. Making the player care about any of this is a monumental task, like trying to beat Dark Souls 1 with only your feet or something. And it's that monumental of a task for a very simple reason. The war with the Empire was just kicking off in the Stormblood patches. A big climactic war had the Emperor and everything. They've been built up to for years, and you put a pause on it for this story. How are you going to make the player give a remote crap about it, let alone love it? Well, Shadowbringers utilizes a very simple hook, actually. Funnily enough, when you think about it, it's actually two. One, the goal is to find your group, the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. They use familiar characters in an unfamiliar setting to give you incentive to continue the story and find out what happened to them, how they changed, how they grew as people. And then number two, the story is far darker and more macabre than Final Fantasy XIV had been up to that point. The tonal shift is sudden. It's a slower pace at the start, but at every step of the way, there's this haunting insecurity that seeps into the player that makes you aware that something terrible is going on here. It's the world building that had made Final Fantasy XIV so enjoyable for the first 3 parts with A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, and Stormblood, but done in a more succinct and engaging manner here. And to showcase this new tone, they have Tesleen dying, which is still one of the most brutal demises the game has ever had. Watching the light slowly melt over her face as it contorts, creating the cocoon around her, and hearing bone and flesh twist and contort within is absolutely brutal, and raises the stakes of this world immediately. We don't want to let anyone else suffer a similar fate. And then meanwhile, you hop over to Yulmore. You have a city filled to the brim with people hell-bent on riding it out until Judgment Day, sitting in their lofty perches overlooking the light-scarred land below as they feast and make merry at everyone's expense and force others to compete against themselves just for the luxury of serving them. Many of the people within are fat cats, which is on-the-nose metaphor for the wealthy. And this is how the expansion starts off. One group, one zone fighting to survive against the onslaught of sin eaters, and the others just giving in, rather living out their days in sin and gluttony than do anything to stop it. The world of the first is brutal, with its huddled masses desperately trying to cling on. When the brutal light surrounds them on all sides, you want to defend them and save them from this fate. Because you do meet some genuinely nice people in this world, and you realize its socio-political climate teeters perilously on a knife edge. Allegiances are tested as you desperately regroup with your fellow scions to save this world from the brink. And the beauty of Shadowbringers lies in its isolation. I think a legitimate argument could be made that Shadowbringers could have been a standalone experience all by itself, because it tells a largely insular story. If you want all the context and emotional weight, you need the story up to this point. Absolutely, no argument for me there. But its new world, with largely, mind you, I said largely, not entirely, a new cast of characters, and even then, the ones we know have undergone significant changes and development in their own right, and the game reintroduces them well enough where I think you could still care about them. Again, it's best experienced after having played A Realm Reborn, Heavensward, and Stormblood, but the work Shadowbringers does to develop its unique cast and introduce and develop its world, all within the confines of one expansion, is truly impressive. Sure, there's moments that feel a little bit slow, but I think even they have some value to them. Heck, even the mining town bit. It showed the pain of loss and desperation, and the hopelessness can all feel. Sure, there's events and moments that feel a bit slow, but I think even they have some value. But the star of Shadowbringers lies in its antagonist. Someone so well written, so well developed, and so well voiced that he has ascended to be my favorite video game antagonist of all time, Emet Selch. It is hard to do this character justice. Dang near every scene he is in adds to him as a character, whether it be his mannerisms, his story, his development, or just the gravity he brings to every scene. He can bring the band so he can bring genuine emotion. Throughout most of Shadowbringers, he tags along your group in the shadows, sometimes coming out, sometimes coming in clutch to save you from the brink. He genuinely wants to see your worth and your value, but at the end of it all is just left wanting. And then we get to the ending. We beat Varthri and save Yulmore, which is cool and all, and it's time for Grahatia, the Crystal Exarch, who has served as essentially our main ally in this world, to enact his plan, reveal his identity as the guy from the Crystal Tower series, from A Realm Reborn, multiple expansions ago, take the light that we had absorbed so that it doesn't destroy us, and he would cast himself into the void as a villain, a robber in the night that came in to grab the hero's spoils and vanish into the night, never to be seen from again, to cast himself out into the void, to die a lonely death, but one that would save the first from the light's advance and to save his idol, his inspiration. And this is when Emet steps out and begins his ascension to legendary status for me. He blows Graha's back out with a singular shot, and Emet to reveal that we had failed to inspire him, to move him. We couldn't control the light. We weren't up to par with the people that he knows from his world all those years ago. But if we wanted to die with dignity, we would seek his home out in the Tempest, where he would let us transform and ravage the world as the most powerful sin eater of them all. We say screw that noise, and when the Scions come asking to join us in our quest to save the captured Grahatia from Emet's clutches, we set out on the back of a giant flying whale, I might add, to do so. It's such a hype moment, where we're going to go after Emet Selch and end this story once and for all. And every amazing story has two things: a great journey and an equally as great, if not even greater, ending. And the ending of Shadowbringers from this point on is one of the best endings ever devised for a video game. Discovering Amarat, a recreated city of the ancients of long ago at the bottom of the sea, recreated by Emet Selch to remember his people. A man. That's all Emet is. Not a monster, not some primordial being, not a god, not just some run-of-the-mill evil wizard. He's just a man who lost everything. Lost his home, his family, his friends, and he wants it back. He desperately wants to bring his world back. He just wants to save his people. And isn't that what we are doing at the end of it all? The lesson is the past is the past, and killing off those who live now to bring back the dead or some ideal is not morally acceptable. But it's a sympathetic position still. He watched as his once perfect world was sundered into a source, and 13 shards, his people, his loved ones, those he cherished, ripped apart to form the people that now inhabit these new worlds. After having sacrificed half his people, originally to summon Zodiac to prevent the literal end of the world, he saw the remaining half torn apart by Hydaelyn to create these shards. He doesn't view us as equals, or even as people. Just scraps of flesh taken from his friends and family to taunt him. And if he is going to save his people, he must rejoin all the worlds and make them whole again. That is his purpose. That is his quest, nay, his mission. And the Ascians up to this point, Emet included, had given us plenty of reason to hate him. But it all just seems so irrelevant when you stand in the city streets of Amadot, amidst a man's reconstructed dreams of his home. It's sad, really. And you can imagine how it probably feels for Emet, who tried to see it our way. He really did. He ate with us, fought with us, led with us, fathered children, and none of it was ever able to change his perspective. He always just saw the shattered forms of his people and decided he had to do something about it. He lived for generations amongst people, and not a moment of that was worth any moment he had before, with his old family and friends. To save us, to save our worlds and our people, because the past is the past and Emet is too far gone at this point to see reason, we take up the fight to oust him. We go through the final dungeon, a recreation of his apocalypse from years gone by, and take the fight to Emet Selch, who summarily begins to absolutely body us. The light begins to overtake the Warrior of Light when our friend, who we met long ago and had been with us every step of the way in this expansion, Oddbert, gives us some rousing words as we let Oddbert speak through us.
Take it. We fight as one. This world is not yours to end. This is our future. Our story.
Graha comes in last, looking to summon our 8-man party for the pending raid fight.
Champions from beyond the rift, heed my call!
And we throw down with Emet Selch one last time. All is laid bare. No more secrets remain. He reveals his most powerful form and his true name, Hades, as it becomes a battle of ideals. The fight for a past now gone or a present worth saving. We yeet an axe through him and job's done, right? Emet, knowing that this is the end, can only do one thing. And honestly, it's fitting. To preserve the legacy of his people, to keep their memory alive, because he no longer can. He asks the Warrior of Light,
Remember. Remember us. Remember that we once lived.
to remember us. Remember that we once lived. We give him the universal head nod, acknowledging that we will keep his will and his people alive through our memory. And he dissipates. The victor shall now write the tale, and the loser became its villain. The man who sacrificed everything and all for his people, his home, his family, is laid to rest. Shadowbringers in the broad sense nails the most important aspects of storytelling. It understands character and how to introduce them and develop them. It understands group dynamics, where some of the best moments are just the characters exchanging some words. It gives bouts of levity and some really grim dark crap. It plays with your sense of hope and expectations, and uses that to its every advantage to keep you at the end of your seat. The way they were able to introduce Amarad at the very end, after having teased and slowly unraveled Emet's story up to this point, is dang near narrative perfection. It never got in the way, but was so utterly engaging that you wanted more. So much of the overall mythos of Final Fantasy XIV and how the world operated and its history was put on its head in Shadowbringers, that it recontextualized so much and made the overall world and its history all the better. And at the end of the day, Shadowbringers didn't need to break from the standard hero versus villain role. It's shades of grey done incredibly well, but the dynamic between the Warrior of Light and Emet Selch was the cornerstone that glued the whole story together. A fight to save those lost, or those who can yet be saved. Having the backdrop be a world on the brink was the perfect setting to go along with this theme. They took a story whose plot on the surface should not have been liked, because it was a detour from the events that were just getting to the climax, but through impressive world building, character introduction, and development, on top of expanding on the background lore and mechanics that compose the world of Final Fantasy XIV, while fleshing out and humanizing the Ascians as an antagonistic group, they made the player care more about the first than the source, arguably. At least I kind of did at the time. It's not a knock on the source, it's a testament to how impressive Shadowbringers is as a whole. Its pacing is second to none, knowing when to switch up aesthetics or moods to paint a compelling scene and sequence of events composed of individuals' regions with their own unique history and stories that engages the player, and combining all that with role quests that cater to the role of characters that you played. If you're a tank, you're the role quest all about the tank guy, etc. It added a sense of individuality and unique charm to the events of Shadowbringers that tied it all together while fleshing out the Warriors of Darkness that we knew for only a couple of patches, and made them some of the most compelling characters in the game, especially with Oddbutt. The game understood human emotion and how to manipulate that to tell compelling and heartwarming stories while simultaneously breaking your heart. The character of Emet Selch was the perfect antagonist for the story as well. In the backdrop of a world where seemingly mindless light-filled abominations scour the world, ripping life itself apart, inserting a sympathetic and understandable antagonist into that world filled with monsters, while tying that story back into the source and the story of that world, not only connected these narratives, it makes Shadowbringers feel like an intrinsic and necessary part of that story. It makes everything feel more engaging, more engrossing, because it understands that sometimes you need villains that are just villains, and sometimes having a character like Emet Selch can bring it all together. It was a force of nature versus the will of just one individual that tied it all together. It makes the world of Final Fantasy XIV feel fuller and richer with deeper and more complex stories to tell because it understands how to make you feel hype or down and depressed. It knows how to convey human emotion and to do so effectively, and it did that a ton through Emet Selch. You always knew you couldn't trust him, but then time and time again he would give you reason to, and then at the very end, his reasoning for everything just made sense. From his perspective, his people were calling out to him to save them. With their bodies torn asunder and reanimated, the world itself was a cruel joke to him. Where the corpses of his friends were animated. No, they weren't the same. Wasn't the true world. He's clearly still the villain because, from our perspective, he was willing to put 14 worlds to the torch to try and bring back what is now in the past. We fought to protect the now and our future, to protect our people. Emet just fought to protect his history and his people, and the world of the first, and all that has happened to it, and to its people, is how far he was willing to go to achieve that. But it stands as a testament to how well he's written, and how understandable his aim is, that at the end of it all, there's no real hatred between Emet and the Warrior of Light, just an understanding that each have their own people to fight for. And Emet's fight was over with. Endwalker would go on to flesh out his character even more, but that is a story for another time. Thank you all for tuning in, my pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And that, my dear viewer, is why I think Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers is one of, if not, the greatest story ever told. If you liked the video, please hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload in the future. Stay safe, leave a comment down below with your favorite memory from Shadowbringers. Was a part of the story, was that gameplay, was a raid? Let me know, I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your perspectives, and to hear your stories. Stay safe everybody, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody.